Sorry, yeah, one second. Record to this computer. You guys ready?
Yep,
Yeah.
ready. Recording in progress.
And
I like that voice. It's very soothing. Welcome, everybody. Great to have you with us for our monthly online gathering for Common Ground. And maybe you're new with us. Maybe you've been with us a while. We've been getting together like this digitally once a month for the last couple of years and had some really fun discussions. I appreciated that last month we really got into kind of I don't know, the personal stories of these our faith journeys and how our faith doesn't look like what it looked like 5 or 10 years ago. And I just wanted to say to you, Stacey and Jess, my partners here. I don't know if there you are on my screen. I really appreciated your stories, all of our stories. It made me feel like I'm not alone in this. I know probably part of the fear of going through a big faith transition is, am I like, there's this feeling like, am I the only one who's ever done this? Did I do something wrong? I was personally very encouraged by hearing your stories and hearing all the emotions and the challenges as well. And our hope for you, whether you're joining us live or on YouTube or down the road at some point, our hope for you is that you would not feel alone in your faith journey. So we're calling this week's discussion Shift Happens, and just talking about these kind of dramatic, I guess, transitions we've had in our beliefs and in our faith journey. So we're going to try to um, share openly and share personally, and really glad that you're here with us. I would just take a brief second here right at the beginning to encourage you to connect with us on our website, commonground.love. There you'll just get a little bit more understanding of who we are, what we do. Sometimes we gather like this online and connect with people this way, but also just last month we had a fun in-person gathering where we had a dinner and a lot of people got to share their own stories of kind of how their faith has evolved and grown over the years. And it was a really sweet time. So I'd encourage you to check out the website. Please sign up for our monthly newsletter and you can connect with us there as well. We'd love to keep you up to date with things that are coming up. There'll be more um, dinners and gatherings this year, live events, and also more online things like this as well. So, anything to add, you two, before we jump in? How's everyone doing? You guys good since last we met?
Yeah, many moons ago.
Yeah, it was feels like a while ago. Yeah, about a month.
Yeah. Life feels very full. Feels really full lately with a lot of stuff. Am I the only one to? Okay, I want to ask this question before we jump into the spiritual stuff because maybe there's some existential reason for this. Did January feel like it was 9 months long and February went like a minute? Was it like did it feel that way for y'all too?
Hmm. I'd say for me, yeah, it's kind of, I don't know about that, like fast and slow. I'd say like in the work that I do, it's kind of been a slow, easy start to the year, I guess. I don't know. We're just kind of getting things going here. So, yeah.
Got it. Jess, did you feel a shift in time? Like it was, I feel like something happened in the time space continuum where, and even the Holderness family, the family that does all the songs in their pajamas, they've been doing it for like 10 years and whatever. They're hilarious. They wrote a song. The guy, um, I can't remember his name, starts with a P. Anyway, wrote a song and it was like that January lasted like 5,674 days or something like that. And I was like, oh, I'm not the only one who's feeling that. Did you feel that way too with you and your boys and your
I mean,
family?
I've kind of felt like that since the last full moon in like November of last year. So it's just been like, they say, pregnancy, like, the first 8 months is like 8 months long, and then the last month is like, 3,685 days long. That's how it's felt. And I was thinking
Hmm.
that's how it's felt at the beginning of this year. And then you said that, and I'm like, yeah, that's pretty accurate.
you telling us you're pregnant? Are you telling us no?
A
Oh.
special announcement? Okay.
I was like, wow, this is quite a place to make that announcement.
Oh man. Yeah. No.
Jess and I have a fun story about that. Yeah. So that's why she was like, don't start
Yeah.
with these days.
Like,
And I'll just
don't.
tell that can I tell this story? Is that all right,
That's
Jess?
fine.
All right. So Phil, I don't know if you know this story, but Jesse, it was like it was 2020 when
2021.
2021.
2020.
That was
Yeah,
2020 when I
it
drove the
was.
boys cross country from
Okay.
California. We bought the van, put a bed in it. I was like, we are getting the hell out of California because it was crazy
Hmm.
during COVID, lockdown central. And I thought, oof, honestly, I saw that the suicide rate had gone, it was 1,200% of what the year normally is by March of 2020 for teenagers. And I had a 15 and 17-year-old, and I was like, there is no way we are sticking around. I don't care if I have to spend every penny that we have in savings to just like make it through this time in a thriving way. Because I saw the writing on the wall that it wasn't going to be, let's just, pull back for 2 weeks. Yeah. I was like, no, that's not what's happening. So I took off cross country and we went on this adventure, the boys and I, and it was so much fun. And so we drove into where Jesse's state is, 3,000 miles away from California. And I pull in and I see her holding her oldest son, Eli, and they're in the headlights and it was raining. And I looked at her and I went, oh, she's pregnant. And I was just like, it was like, you didn't look pregnant. It wasn't that. It was just like this knowledge that I had. And it was just like this amazing moment. So then we were in the kitchen and you said something to me, about, oh, I'm glad I didn't end up being pregnant this year. So that's what I remember. You remember something different, but I heard you saying something like, I'm glad I didn't end up being pregnant this year or whatever. And I said, well, you're going to kind of have to adjust because you actually are pregnant. And you were like, no, I'm not. That's the way I remember it. Just you get your
Whoa.
version. And and then you had bought vodka for me or something. And I was pouring myself a drink. And then you were going to pour yourself a drink. And then you were like, I don't know if I should do this. You're freaking me out. Anyway, and then I'll just let you take over the story from here because it's your that's your part. But go ahead, Jess.
Oh yeah. I mean, um, it's funny, we were recounting this like
Yes.
a couple weeks ago, and I have a different version of this story, but it all lands in the same place that Stacey told me. It was like, hello, you're pregnant. And I was like, hi, no, I'm not. Like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm definitely not. I'm not pregnant. And we were just like sitting over the table talking, and I could not stop thinking about how like confident she was in saying that. And
Hmm.
it was really freaking me out. And I couldn't pay attention to our conversations. I was just like, I'm gonna go pee. I have to be back. And I took a pregnancy test while I was peeing because I was like, I need to be able to verify that I'm not pregnant. And I was pregnant.
Whoa.
Yeah. So
That's
yeah,
what it's like to have a Stacey in your life.
we're pretty bonded.
Oh man.
Yeah, I
That's
have more
that's
stories, but I don't know that they're fitting for here and now. But anyway, maybe when we do our live event, we'll tell more stories. But
stories
there
about
we go.
Pete.
So
Yeah.
Phil, take us to the topic.
Okay, good. Well, great to be with you guys again. I here at the start, what I was hoping to do is I kind of wanted to, when you're in the middle of a faith transition, it's so hard to see what's going on. Like when you're first getting into it, you just don't really know, you can't tell what's happening. You don't have any perspective. But now that all three of us have kind of journeyed a little farther down the road, I thought it might be interesting to look back kind of at those very first moments. And just, I'd love for us each to share a little bit and we can get into conversation about it. But like, what was the first moment you can remember maybe about when you thought, "Oh, something might be changing or a belief I have feels like it's shifting." I'm just curious, like, was that, is it a really clear moment? Is there like a series of a couple years where things were moving. I don't know. I just thought it'd be interesting to kind of look back and share what were the signs? When did you know something was changing? How did you know? What did it feel like? And just try to focus in on the very beginning part of it. Do you guys, can you remember, when you think back, is there something that comes to mind as far as a moment where you thought, oh, I think something might be changing for me?
Take it, Jess.
Yeah, I mean, I touched on it last conversation, but for me, a lot of it revolved around hell. And it was kind of like a quiet background thing in my, middle school, high school years of that's at least when I got more involved in the church. Um, it was a beautiful church, um, like wonderful pastor, wonderful people, great community, great worship. And it wasn't like fire and brimstone, but it still was in the theology. It was still in the teachings, and it just unsettled me to think that so many people would be suffering for eternity, like more people than not. And that really bothered me, but it came to a head when I was in
Hmm.
college and I got more involved in, campus ministry, and I was an assistant to a youth pastor in a local church, um and I ended up having a roommate in college who was Jewish, and we really bonded and became really close. And it provided such a contrast for me that like I couldn't ignore it anymore. It was like I'm
Hmm.
staring at somebody right in the face that I'm supposed to believe is gonna burn in hell for all of eternity. And like I love her. Like how, and it really messed with me. I was like, either I love people more than God does, or I have like a twisted version of what love is. Like my heart saying something different than my head is saying, and I'm told I can't trust my heart. So it was like a mind, you know, beep
Hmm.
to the nth degree. And that's how it started for me, and then started unraveling for that. And of course there's more, but I'll let somebody else share it, and then
Yeah.
we'll bounce back and
What
forth.
about you, Phil? You go second. I'll,
Hmm.
I'll go last on that one.
Yeah. I mean, so thinking back for me, there's not like a specific moment where it was raining and I was on a walk down the street and everything changed. It wasn't like that. Um, the one word that came to my mind when I was thinking a little bit about this was restlessness. Like I had this, you know, I had walked along the Christian faith path for decades, and I don't know, I never, looking back on some of the theology, like what you shared, Jess, yes, now I can look at it and it does bother me, some of the things that are just in the, in the faith statement. But for 20 plus years, none of that bothered me. And then I don't know, maybe somewhere around, I don't know how much of this is me getting older. I don't know, somewhere around 40. I just remember feeling like a restlessness, like inside I just didn't feel very settled. So I know that's a little general, but I do remember that feeling. And for me, um, there's years of just like almost kind of quieting that restlessness. Like Stacey, yeah, like we worked for the faith. We're employees for God. So there was certainly a period of a couple years where this restlessness that I had, I just kind of shushed it and like kept it quiet, or just like maybe just kept it to myself. It wasn't something I was gonna say to other people. I wasn't gonna share with others. I didn't feel probably like I could share with others in the position that I was in. But yeah, I guess I just kind of remember just feeling uncomfortable and feeling like something's up, but I did not know what it was. I didn't know what lied ahead for me. I didn't know how much of a like dramatic shift in faith was coming. I just kind of felt uneasy inside. I don't know. That's kind of what I remember.
That's good. I feel that that
Hmm.
word really means a lot to me, and that restlessness, yeah, it's very holy. um, yeah, there wasn't one key aha, blinded fall off my horse and have this like inner revelation. What I think is that I had a lot of questions that would come up over time, and I felt like, the song The Farmer in the Dell, the cheese stands alone, like the farmer takes a wife and the cow has the this, but the cheese stands alone. And I was like, I feel like the cheese standing alone. I'm the only one who's not seeing it this way, and I don't know that I can say something. And then, there's this thing that just started coming up inside of me, like, I want to ask this question. And I would get calls from like the pastor's wife or whatever. I'd ask a question in a group thinking, this is maybe I'm not the only one who thinks this thought or has this question. And I'd get calls like, we don't want to distract people from their faith. We don't want to cause people to fall in their faith by asking those kinds of questions. And so, the message that was sent is that questions are the opposite of faith instead of a really important part of it. And so that dissonance, I tried to make it work in the same way I had tried to make it work that a loving God would send the majority of the people he created to hell. Like you have to do a lot of mental gymnastics in my mind to make that happen. And that's how I feel, and that's how I felt. And I was like, I I don't know that I want to do the mental gymnastics anymore, but it's not like I felt brave to like come out of the Christian closet like we talked about last time on our podcast. I didn't feel brave. I felt like I love this community. I because I'm two things. I'm a pioneer who's used to being the cheese that stands alone and having a vision that people don't see and having a lot of aloneness to my vision at first. And then like 2 years later, people see what I see and kind of catch up to that. And so I'm used to that. But at the same time, I also have a heart that's like a yellow lab. I love people. I want to be around people. I want to be in community. And so I have this whole be a Noah who builds the ark when everybody else is going to the beach and you're building an ark for the one day when it's going to rain. And I have that part of me that goes, I want to go to the beach. I love the people. I love people so much. So, but I also
Mm.
had an insecurity. I think I had a fear of rejection that really was strong in me. And so, I ended up getting this calling to rest. And I did this practice of rest for 15 minutes a day. And in that 15 minutes a day, I heard a lot of what Phil was talking about, a lot of inner restlessness, a lot of those questions I would bring to my idea of God in that 15 minutes. Eventually, this silence overwhelmed me, and I just had one question. I want to know who you are. And the whole journey for months after that, 15 minutes grew to 30 minutes, grew to sometimes hours of sitting in silence and stillness. And eventually, this whole kind of thing unraveled inside of me called my former beliefs and took me into a realm that I didn't really know what my new beliefs were. I just knew that they weren't the old ones. And that's what I ended up
Mm.
writing my whole book, God Loves Me, I think, Stories from Hell, Heaven, and the Other Side of Texas, about that unraveling. Yeah.
Mm.
So it definitely was
Yeah.
a process.
I want to, in a minute, I want to talk a little bit about, I thought it'd be interesting if each of us might be able to share like some how a specific belief changed, like something we used to believe it this way, but now we believe this about it. I just thought because a shift in faith, it's such a like vague term. I thought it might be helpful to try to identify a couple things. So just think about that. But I'm curious. So presumably there might be other people right now that are either listening to this or someone sends this talk to them who are at that very beginning stage, and you know what it feels like, you remember some of that. I'd just be curious, what would you want to say to someone who may be at the beginning stages of a transition in their faith? What would you want to say to them, knowing what you've been through?
I would definitely say to find community. Um, I don't feel like that's something that I found for quite a little while. It was just my own,
Hmm.
questioning and conflict, like this inner turmoil at first. And it just felt like me and God and me and, my pastors or leaders who were not open to, my thoughts. So it really just became a conversation between God and I until I eventually found Stacey's blog. Um, and that there felt like a resonance there. Um, Even though it wasn't explicitly talking about, deconstructing Christianity or faith unraveling or whatever. But then I started coming into, after a while, a greater community, seeing like, oh, there's actually a lot of people who are talking about this. And I don't know if it just wasn't around then. I think it
Mm.
started with me, with Julie Forwarda's book, Raising Hell. And then, I found another author, and then I found another author. And then I'm like, wow, there's a whole group of people where it's safe to ask these questions and have these conversations. And it did feel safe to me because it wasn't like anti-Christianity and ex-evangelical and um, you know, that kind of thing, which would have been off-putting to me at the time and just induced more fear. It was just exploratory people that even a lot of them still had their Christian faith, but it was they've expanded and there was nuance, and that's what I needed. And I like tiptoed my way into like where I am now. It was a journey over several years, and I know that at the onset, what was so important for me once I found it was community safe spaces to be able to have conversation,
Mm.
or just even validate like the own thoughts that are going on inside.
That's a great
Yeah.
answer. I love that, Jess. Community is so important. And in that, you get to, you know, hear other people's questions too, and you don't feel so alone. And I think being understood is like it makes half of the crazy feelings go away. For me, I'd probably encourage a practice of stillness, and I'd ask a lot of questions. I would just be saying, what's coming up for you? And lead, instead of leading them down my journey, I would
Mm.
encourage them to be on theirs. And I would, I've had a lot of people who have come to me, and I've been sort of that person that people have come out of the Christian closet to, because I was very public about it. Like Jess said, I had a blog out years ago when I was a professional musician, and then I had left the church, and I had a blog called Conversations on Life, Love, and God with Stacey Robbins. And I did talk about the things that were about my deconstruction experience and asking bigger questions. And I think the thing that I would ask somebody who is in front of me is to consider putting a template of the theology you believe, and now put it over the person you hate the most and the person you love the most. Does
Mm.
that theology still work for you? Does that still make sense? Does that still feel the same way? And the journey that I think that I would want to encourage somebody on is anything that helps them connect to themselves, because I really believe that there's an aspect of religion that comes from a self disconnect. And I think this is my opinion, obviously. This is I think that when we are disconnected from ourselves, it makes sense to us to have a God who would be willing to punish us and put us at risk for not agreeing with a certain ideology or philosophy or theology. That makes sense. And just in the same way, and I'm going to just be really radical right here and go out on a limb. Why not? I've already, burning up the ground here. Um, it's like being able to spank your children. That was okay in my mind. Like I could justify that in my mind when I wasn't a parent. And and then I was like, after I'd worked through a certain amount of healing in my own life, I'm like, wait a minute. Somebody would get arrested if they did this to my child, and it's okay for me to do that. And then to call that punishment love and to cross that physical boundary with my child, like that takes a lot of mental gymnastics. And it would, and I believe that comes from a root of disconnect, that we're willing to do that to our own child. And so in the same way, I believe that if we were to, for me to believe in a God who would punish us eternally for not, and that same God in the same Bible says, love your enemy. So I'm supposed to love my enemy, but God's not going to love me. Like that doesn't make sense. And so I just think that a lot of our religious ideas, whether religious ideas in politics, where we get into extremism, reward and punishment, beliefs in medicine or natural health or education or wherever we can have um, that black or white reward and punishment kind of mindset, I think that comes from disconnect. So I'd really just want to encourage that person to get reconnected to themselves so they could hear what that still small voice and inner wisdom would say.
Mm.
Yeah.
I
That
want to say,
wasn't that
stays
wasn't
before you go.
small.
So that really resonates with me, and that's where I feel like I found myself later in my journey, because it was that voice inside of me that I started with, but it was like so scary to follow
Yeah.
that voice because you have all of the conditioning coming up against actually following something else, And so I feel like that's why for me, I had to start with books from other experts
Yeah.
and other authorities so that they could actually dismantle some of the like theological ramblings I had going on in my mind before I even felt safe enough to like reconnect with myself. But then
Mm.
that is where I came to at my
I,
point too.
I
Yeah.
definitely remember like I read I mean, but I feel like I read every book that was written by someone who went through a journey like this. I just
Yeah.
read them all, and it was very helpful. It really was. Yeah, some of them are more like data and theology and science, but some of them are way like artsy and personal and emotional. But man, every one of those books was helpful to me. It really was. I think for me, like if I was talking to someone in a situation like this, I, these words aren't necessarily anything, but to me they were. But I remember getting to a point where I said, what if the river is good? And what I mean by that is I was I was pretty sure that this like new direction in my beliefs early on, I was pretty sure it was a bad thing. Like maybe it
Yeah.
was evil, maybe it was me just wanting to, whatever. Like I was just pretty convinced that it was a bad move. Because of course that was the voice, I'd say the leading voice in my head and the voices around me was like to go a different direction is definitely a bad thing. But as I continued to journey, it really came this moment where it was like, it was so meaningful to me. It's like, what if this flow or this river or this movement that's happening in my life that I didn't, to my knowledge, didn't ask for? To my knowledge, I didn't like plan this. This was a surprise to me too, I think. Yes, maybe we could go down to deeper levels and maybe there's more there, but to stay at surface level fill, this was a surprise to me, this whole transition. But I do remember just kind of getting to the point where like, what if this is good? What if this is for my good? What if this isn't to kill me and destroy me and to send my soul to hell forever? Like, what if this is actually for my growth and for my good? And for some reason, that little question or flip really helped me kind of in those early years. Like this could be, to use the word God, this could actually be God like moving me in this direction. And early on that felt impossible. Like that was like for sure no. This was like the work of the devil. But later it's like, what if this is good, or what if this is God at work in me? And that kind of helped me to keep going, I think. So,
That's very real, and that's very normal, I think, is to think that there's something wrong. There's
Mhm.
something wrong
yeah.
because, it's like Anne Lamott's quote. I love this quote. I want it. I read so many of her books. I can't remember from where this is, but she said the opposite of faith isn't doubt, it's certainty.
Mhm.
And there's something about in our journey where we were taught that if you're doubting, then it's from the devil, right? And yet, when I would read about the infamous doubting Thomas, I saw something so different once I allowed myself to have the questions. And I was such a truth seeker. But when I allowed myself to have the questions, I saw really beautiful answers in the Bible, which is a really has is a book of wisdom to me. There's so much wisdom in it. But I saw the kindness of Christ when Thomas doubted. Jesus didn't go, "Oh, you're such an asshole for not believing in me. Forget you. I'm not." Like, Jesus went right to him and said, "You need to see my scars? Here, put your hands here." It's like Jesus went to him because Thomas didn't go to greet him when all the, disciples were just like, "Oh, let's go, um, let's go see Jesus," because we heard he was right. He's like, "No, I'm not going. I saw him die." And Jesus went to him, and I thought, that's that's a better picture of what happens when I have questions and I have doubts, is that spirit, Christ, whatever answers, love, comes and greets me in that place. I don't have to go and force myself to do something that I don't have the faith for in that moment. Love will meet me where I am.
Mm.
And I want to go to the side here because we were talking about a couple of things. We've got comments here on the side with Rock said, "I remember spanking my kiddo and justified it as I was obeying God, but it wasn't a good feeling." Yeah, I know that very beginning in our parenting, Rock, where we'd have those conversations, and yeah, that was a no go very early on for us. Um, And Alicia says, "I realized I could keep ignoring this thing or turn and face it. And at some point, it felt silly. Like, who am I kidding? God already knows this, what's
Mm.
going on inside of me. So I'm just hiding from myself. And perhaps
Mhm.
this is even him, and maybe even him answering my prayer to know him more." I know I
Mm.
wish I had pulled up. That's so great, Alicia. I really feel that. And I wish I pull up. There's this part of my book, God loves. I hope you guys would hand my book to somebody then, if you're going to be handing out books. But there's a point at which I said almost the same exact thing. I was like, wait a minute, like I keep trying to hide this information from God, but it's like being a fat person hiding behind a skinny tree. It reminded me of Caleb when he was little and he was like 3 years old, and we had this house in a front yard, and we had a big tree, and Caleb would go outside to poop behind the tree. But he didn't realize that as he was pooping behind the tree, so I couldn't see him from inside the house in the bay window, that everybody on the street who was passing by could see him poop. So he was just like, what he thought he was hiding from me, he was totally exposed to like a skrillion people. And, that's kind of what it is with God, right? Alicia says, equally as silly came the thought of how can I love others more than God, the God I claim to serve? How does that make any sense? Exactly. That's like what Jess was talking about. So good stuff. Thanks, guys, for your comments.
Well, maybe it'd be interesting because, like, in a way, we're talking about general ideas, this shift in faith. I thought maybe, and I could be wrong, sometimes I am, but I thought it'd be fun to try to identify, or interesting to try to identify maybe a belief you used to have that you no longer have, or maybe a specific belief that you didn't used to have that you do have now. Obviously, I mean, there was a time during this transition for me where I was like, I don't know, I don't believe anything, or I was like pushing all belief away. It was like really just all the things, what do I not believe? But then over the years, I would say has come, I don't know if beliefs is the right word, but because I think in a space like this, I've noticed I hold my beliefs a little differently. The holding is not as tight. It's a much looser kind of holding. But I would say, yeah, there's still things I believe. And it's not like, there's not like you're either a Christian or you don't believe there's a God. And this is all like, a scientific accident. Like, it's not, those aren't the only two options. There's only about a million things in between. So I don't know. I'm just curious if you guys have any thoughts about how a specific belief, how it changed, or something you stopped believing, started believing in this time.
Yeah. I remember, being told, like, Jesse, you can't just cherry pick, what you
Mm.
like and what you don't like from the Bible. And it's funny because that's like exactly what I do now, and I feel totally free and totally fine about it.
Mm.
Um, I feel what resonates with me, and I trust in that, and I've learned to use um that as my barometer for truth. So I go by, truth by the way that it feels. And if I am in contact with something that feels freeing inside of me, then that is my indicator that, like there is truth here. But I don't need to be certain anymore. Maybe that's because I have expanded into ideas that feel so true to me, and I do like find safety and anchoring in there, that I don't need everything to work itself out, but I absolutely still hold some of the beliefs that I held when I was a Christian. Sometimes I feel like I'm closer to Jesus than some Christians that I know, which is funny because I also believe that, to other Christians, I would be considered a heretic, a false prophet, uh, all of those things, right? Dangerous. So it's been hard for me to be in friendships with Christians, just knowing that, like, if they really knew what I believed, I feel like a lot of them would see me through those eyes. But, I don't believe what I believe for anybody else anymore,
Yeah.
not even to please God. I believe what I feel is true in my heart. And so, yeah, I have kept, certain things from Christianity, from the Bible. But that would be a whole, I mean, to like really divulge and, why and what. But, just generally, I definitely have kept a lot. I've discarded a lot. And like Stacey said, I really largely see the Bible as a book of wisdom. And that's probably one of the biggest things for me, is that I once believed that the Bible was an
Mhm.
infallible, inerrant, perfect word of God breathed through man. Whereas I now see it as a library, which I'm pretty positive that Bible actually translates to library, a library of books written by many different authors over many, many years, and then compiled, you know, by the Catholic Church, right? And not everything even made it into this like book of writings, who I see it now more as people wrestling with their faith and seeking God and writing that down. I think that many of them were actually divinely inspired, and others were, their hearts were towards God, and they were searching, and they were um, so I mean, is there error? I think so, because man, man wrote the Bible from what I believe now. And so, yeah, there's a lot there, but
Yeah.
that's
Well,
that's
that's a pretty specific one. It's like, yeah, the Bible used to be like, in a way, the final word. Like, yeah, like you said, you can't disagree with it, or you're wrong. It's set in stone. And I think to all of us that feels pretty differently. I think I want to give this quote to Richard Rohr, but I could be wrong about that. But I love one of the things he says is it's not true because it's in the Bible. It's in the Bible because it's true. To me, that was like when I heard it, I was like, it was so helpful to me. I'm like, oh yeah, these things are true human experiences. These questions of what is God and who are we and what are we doing here? Like it's such a beautiful human book when it doesn't have to be like God's final word on everything. I don't know. Like that's my feeling. Like yeah, there's a lot of truth in there, and it's in there because it's true to like the human experience. Um,
Yes.
Yeah,
yeah.
and I
The
remember we in
postulates.
Bible studies. Oh, I'm sorry, Stace.
No, you go ahead.
And we would, we would take a text from a paragraph of one book and we would study that text for the whole hour. And like we would really dive into like the words and, of like this one like sentence is what I mean, one sentence. And I remember then just being like, man, this just seems like really meticulous and like fine-tooth comb and just, I don't know, it just didn't even fit with me then. Um, and now I'm just like, oh my gosh, I feel like that's kind of like taking a hair off of your head and just like, I mean, like you can just look
Hmm.
into it with such precision that I don't need anymore because I don't, believe every word to be I mean, gosh, like how could it be such a perfect, infallible text and there be 45,000 different denominations of Christianity and
Mm,
growing probably that are all, have their own lens of like
right.
deciphering
Yeah.
what it is.
This is what it says clearly.
Right.
This is what it clearly says. But yeah, there's like so many thoughts about what it clearly says.
Right.
It's
Right.
interesting. I would say
Yeah.
for me, I like I still there's a few thoughts that really resonate with me. So like I'll share one of them as an example is like there's more to me than meets the eye. Like there's more to me, Phil, than you can see in this physical reality. Like so in a way what I'm saying is like I'm really grateful for being in the Christian faith as a kind of getting in as a teenager, Jess, kind of like you, like youth group, college, all that. I it really helped me to buy into. It really helped me to like accept the idea that I have like a spirit or a soul. Like there's part of Phil that goes way deeper below the surface than just age and skin and whatever. Like that is still a thought that really moves me forward. There's more to me than you can see. And then similarly with the earth and this physical world we live in, there's more going on here than just science and than just an earth with living beings on it. Like I truly believe there is like a invisible spiritual reality that's more real than this real, that's kind of behind the scenes of this whole thing. But again, that is in a way it's kind of a Christian thought, like God created the world. Like I'm like, yeah, this thing, like there's invisible spiritual reality behind this physical reality. So I don't know, that's what came to mind for me. Like it's like, yeah, I kind of there are some real similarities. I believed those things when I'm a Christian, but then at the same time, if you try to over define them, that's when I find myself backing away, is like when it's over defined, like, yeah, God created the world and here's exactly what God's like. Here's what he's up to. Here's what he wants from us. Here's what happens after we die. Like the more specific it gets, I will say the harder it is for me to really lean in. But
Yeah.
but those are beliefs that I think have been growing in me even from before a shift in my beliefs.
Well, I think that we talked about this a couple of times ago, this whole idea that there's more that we can't see than we can. That's what something I told my boys when they
Mm,
were younger. It's like hold loosely to, your whole picture kind of thing, because there's more that we can't see. Like you could see your hand. We all look at our hand and go, "Oh, I see my hand." But we can't see the muscles that are underneath the skin. We can't see the blood. We can't see the cells. We can't, there's so much we can't see until we cut it open and we have then the optics or the ability, the tools to be able to see, that which is not visible. And it's just like the realm of the great invisible. We can't, we, until we have that, whatever that tool is for being able to measure, we just have to assume that this is wired into our design, that we can't see a whole lot. And there, but it seems like there's something there, that soul, like if you want to take it to the Bible, I think it's Ephesians that talks about that we were chosen before the creation of the world. Well, that's kind of amazing. We were chosen before we were created. What of us was chosen? Those are big thoughts. For me, that passage that in Jeremiah that talks about the heart is deceptively wicked. Who can trust it? It's like, who, doggy? I really want to sit down and have a conversation with, that person and ask that question. What were you talking about?
mm,
Heart is deceptively wicked. Who can trust it? And it just makes me go, one of the things that I care so much is to be connected to my heart.
Yeah.
And whatever I make that mean, my heart meaning that part of me that I feel like is the most trustworthy, right? That is so valuable, or is one of the most trustworthy things about me, or that is so valuable. It's the thing that connects me to humanity. It's the very thing that connects me to God, right? That's what I think. It's like my heart. That's what connects me to other people. That's what, like, my heart is so beautiful. And so I think to create a message, or at least maybe this is a version or a rendition or a translation, I don't know, but I probably should do a deeper dive into that if I cared enough. But I'm just saying, the old world that I lived in was you can't trust your heart, and it makes you not trust yourself, and it's really hard to walk through life not trusting yourself. Then you don't trust your intuition, you don't trust your instincts. You don't, there's no rest where you don't trust. And then to live with yourself, that's what I think is probably one of the roots of autoimmune dis-ease in our culture and in our bodies, is that we're living in a constantly racing, trying to get away from the enemy. Because if you don't trust yourself, when you don't trust people, you lock your doors, right? You lock the doors to your car, you lock the doors to your home, and you go, I don't trust those people outside. I'm going to go to bed and feel safe. Well, if you don't trust yourself, what are we doing to lock ourselves off from ourselves? What are we doing in the state of not being able to trust? If we're sleeping with the enemy all the time, if there's no safe place, we're going to run our adrenals down to the ground. We're going to be running on adrenaline until we have no more. And then we're going to hit a wall and have to repair. And that's kind of what I think
mm,
happens a lot in our culture, in our Christian culture. And my Christian background was, there was a lot of, well, you can't trust yourself. Oh, you can't trust yourself. And then people are living in a quite a state of frantic anxiety that we're trying to medicate with faith. Um, and I feel like it gets really messy. It just,
mm.
I'm going to leave it there. It gets messy.
Well,
Um,
it just when you say that about, I mean, I have like flashes that go off, when you talk about not trusting your heart, because I've been through this with Eli too. Um, some really wonderful conversations with my 9-year-old, then 8-year-old around this. But I mean, we're also taught that, to deny ourselves, like to deny our very selves, and you can't trust your heart. And so that was where things got really messy for me inside, because here I was listening to my heart and not denying my doubts and not denying my fears and not denying my questions, all of the things I'm taught not, that's like bad, dangerous territory. Don't go there. But I was in such conflict by not going there that I just decided to risk going there anyways, because um, I couldn't live so divided anymore. And I also, came to the point where I just knew that the more that I followed God from that place, it was really just from fear and not love anyways. So I thought, that doesn't equate. But something that really was like an aha for me later, much later. I wish I had found Aaron Abke. He's a YouTuber and he has a series on deconstructing Christianity, and I found his videos, more recently, and he had talked about the Bible as far as infallibility, and he took a sticky note and he was like, what if I wrote on a sticky note, this sticky note is the an infallible and inspired sticky note, and then he writes whatever he wants on it. He's like, that doesn't make it true. Like, it doesn't make it true because it's written on the sticky note that this is what this is, and we've all taken that to mean that because like the Bible says it is. But then in the end, well, then the Quran, I don't know if I'm saying that right, or this other holy book or their holy book, what if theirs says it is? Well, then at that point, what do you do? Like, how do you decide what's true then? Like, there has to be some kind of compass in us. There has to be some kind of internal GPS in us that will guide us towards what is true. And I have found that to be our heart, or like Stacey, you said, whether you call it your heart, this place in you, this part in us that is connected and knows.
Absolutely. I remember when
Mm.
this pastor came to me on a Monday. He said, he's got a Southern accent, shocking. He's like, Stacey, it's Monday. This is when I make all my hard calls. And I was like, okay, I'm in trouble. And and he said something about, I heard that you said that you don't believe in the Trinity. I said, no, I didn't say that. I said, I don't. I said, I don't know what I believe about that. I said, I don't call it the Trinity. It's a beautiful word. I love the word Trinity. And, it was a great name in the Matrix. And I think it's beautiful. But I said, it was a name that was made up to describe the, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and by somebody like a couple hundred years after Christ. And I said, why do I have to use that word just because somebody made that word up to describe? I said, what if we're a quadrinity? What if I'm part of the whole thing? What if all of humanity is? Like, what do you call that entity? And he was just like, I said, I don't know. And he said, you're not allowed to say you don't know and still be a leader. I said, sure I am. I said, you do it all the time, but you just pick the things that you say I don't know about and you find other pastors to agree with it. And if enough people agree with it, we're allowed to say, I don't know. I said, I don't know if heaven exists. I don't know if hell exists. I don't know any of this. We're all living our best guess. And he said, well, St. Augustine said, I said, well, St. Stacy said that. And he was like, whoa. And I said,
Yeah.
why does somebody who's old and dead have more credibility
Mm.
than me in my spiritual experience? And I remember there was a quote. It wasn't Malcolm Muggeridge. It was another person who said, and I quoted it in the front of my book, or at the end of my book, a man with an experience is not at the mercy of a man with an argument. And this pastor wanted to argue with me about my validity and my ability to say I don't know. And this was his day that he made hard phone calls. But I was like, I've had an experience, and the experience is this. When I had that old faith that I was, a music worship leader and an ordained minister and all of these things that I was, which were valuable and beautiful to me in so many ways. And I also had a profound anxiety and tremendous fears. And when I left that, I I entered these new or different or altered or unfolding ideas about what God possibly was. And I had so much peace. And here's the challenge in in saying that in my Christian circles at that time is you get caught in these Salem witch trial kind of moments. And in the Salem witch trials in the 1600s, what would happen is, in Massachusetts and the Dutch colonies and in New York and England, what they would do is they would take a witch, if they didn't burn her alive at the stake, they would take her and tie her to this big long pole with a seat at the end with rocks tied to the end, and she's chained on or roped on, and then put her to the bottom of the lake. And if she rose to the top, she was a witch. And if she drowned, she was innocent and she wasn't a witch. And it was like, oh, sorry, you dead. We were wrong. But if she rose to the top, she was considered a witch, and they would burn her alive. And it's like, either way, you're dead, no matter what, because the people who have set the metrics for the measurements for you being innocent or guilty have you end up dead either way. And that's what I feel like happens when we say things like what I would say in Christianity is I had more peace when I left the old theologies. And they'd say, oh, that's the devil. And it's like, it's really tricky because I end up being wrong no matter what. If I'm anxious and I stay in the church with the theologies that I was taught, I die in my own way because I'm living in that constant hell on earth. And if I leave and I have peace, then it's the devil and I'm wrong. I'm being deceived by my peace. I'm going to be wrong. I'm going to be wrong and
Yeah.
dead either way. And that's whenever I see that happen in the culture, whether it was during COVID, whether it's during medical things, whether it's during political things, and you're going to be wrong either way, I go, oh, that's a Salem witch trial moment. We haven't evolved past Salem witch trials. We've just changed the way we kill people either way. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you guys one more question. So, I'm curious. I think it'd be interesting for us to each share like what's been the most or what's been a challenging part of going through a shift in your long time faith tradition. But also, and we've talked a little bit about some of the challenge, but I want to just create a little space for like what's one of the challenges of going through a shift. But then what's something great? Like what's something good or positive that's in your life now? What does your life look like now that you have walked through such a wild thing as this? So if you guys are willing to, you could just pick one of those if you want, or both. But I'm curious, like, yeah, what's a challenge you've been through? And then what are some of the rewards or the positive things that have found you as you've continued to journey in your faith?
You want to go first, Phil? You haven't
Sure.
gone
Well,
first yet.
okay, yeah, Phil, you go first.
Sure. Yeah, okay. So I'll share like okay. So challenging, I'll say this. The container of Christianity was such a helpful container for my wife and I in our marriage.
Oh,
Like I
oh
didn't
my
know
God.
it. What I'm saying is like I didn't realize like we're pretty different people and that's fine. That's not good or bad, but when we were in this Christian container and that was like what defined us and we believed all the same things and we had the same like beliefs about morals and what's good and what's bad. I didn't realize what a helpful container that was for our marriage. By the way, that's not to say it might have also been a limiting factor for us too. It was convenient to really just get us aligned with certain things. But in a way, you can imagine like taking the lid off a container and out we go. In this new space, it's I was going to say like this is kind of a challenge, but there's a good part of it too, which is we no longer have this like system that totally aligns us about everything. We no longer see everything the same. We no longer believe all the same stuff. Yeah, we're both on a faith journey. We're both like kind of leaving this thing and wandering out into the woods. But we're not in the exact same place is what I'm saying. And it can be scary. It's been scary for us. Like, oh, well, what if we wander in different directions so far that we like lose sight of each other? Or why don't we think the same about this thing? I don't know. That's been interesting after being married for 20 years. And then that faith thing was just so convenient. By the way, things that are convenient, like I said, it could have its limits too. But I guess we're just having to really find our way without, without all the guardrails up, It's been interesting. It's been interesting for sure. I kind of I'll just say that as I kind of think about some positive stuff, it really also though has opened up a new part of our relationship where I guess when you agree about everything and everything's kind of given to you and you just like go to the Bible for the answer, in a way, I'll just say we have more interesting conversations now than we did when everything was already dialed in.
Yeah.
And I love it. Like I'm loving it. I'm loving all well, what about this? Well, maybe this. Well, have you ever thought about this? Well, listen to this speaker. Read this cool book. We're just talking about such a wide variety of things that I'm really loving it. But I'm just saying, like, I guess maybe this is my challenge and my positive thing would be like how drastically it's impacted this relationship that's been a long time thing in both of our lives. So
You're laughing and I'm laughing because I
didn't see
know
that.
it's
Didn't
not
see this coming. Yeah, didn't
it's
see all this coming.
interesting. It's not
Yeah,
boring and it's not
yeah,
easy. It's not easy. It's
yeah,
really bumpy. It's
yeah.
very
But it
mhm.
is, and we've hit some major bumps. But on the other side of it, I think we're both discovering also there's like a new depth and like a freshness to our relationship that when all the answers are already done and finalized and written, in the teacher's handbook, and there's nothing really to discuss. I'd say we're finding a lot more. We're finding like a new closeness that's just very different from what it used to look like. So I don't know. How about that for my challenging but also positive impact that this little journey's been for us.
I think that's great. And I know there's so much that's not being said because
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind.
relationships
Yeah,
are a lot.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
a lot. And I like
A, a,
what you
si-
said on that too.
a
That it,
similar, oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Well, what I was just going to say was, and then I do want to hear what you're saying. Like, similarly with our kids, like that, this container used to also, in a way, just kind of define our relationship with our kids. Well, here's what's happening. Here's how we got here. Here's what life is about. Here's what happens later. So without any of that, it's just leading to, I'd say, kind of a fresh, interesting, but far less predictable sort of relationship. That's kind of true in marriage and with the kids, all that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like what the way you said it, Phil, that it's like you would look at the Bible and go, okay, that's the answer. And you both agree. And then it contains all of you. And now it's like the question becomes, what's going to contain you if it's not that? And that's quite a journey because when you're raised your whole life with this is the thing that's going to contain you, or you have that experience your whole adult life or your whole marriage or you know, or you're halfway through parenting, raising your kids, and then all of a sudden you've got to go through that big old journey of what's containing us? What are our beliefs? How do we explore those when we're used to being told them and we've got to discover them? And wait, are we safe with ourselves and safe with life to discover it? It's a it's not a small deal. And that's why when, you know, Alicia and I have had conversations or whatever, I'm like, this is a big deal. Like, just give it the respect that it, like, respect yourself in this, that this is enormous. And I remember I had some friends who said to me, "You're so brave, Stacey." And I looked at them like they had a squirrel sitting on their head. I'm like, why am I brave to do this? And then when I really think about it, it's so effing brave to take something where you're willing to risk what feels like at that time and you believe is your eternal salvation for the sake of something that's bigger than that to you, your freedom, your questions being asked, like that is real bravery to let go of that safety net and go, my freedom is more important than my security. Wait a minute. That's a big deal. So I really respect all of us and everybody out there who's gone on any kind of faith journey to ask questions. I'll share mine last. Jess, what is yours? What's a place of challenge or goodness or both that you want to share?
Yeah, Phil, I feel similarly to you. I feel like it challenged Stephen and I, who have been, married for a decade now and together for 12 years, and a lot of our relationship was founded on Christian kind of ideas. I mean, it's funny because when we met, we both were kind of in a phase of questioning. And I remember we even got this like really old school book. It was called like Decide for Yourself. And we were like gonna do that together and just like question and expand and think, but we were still very much within the container of Christianity. And so it was really me who was like got so unsettled that I kept moving away and kind of questioning more and bigger and started not just maybe trying to make sense of my faith from within my faith, but just make sense of life and my heart from places that weren't just within the confines of Christianity. And, that rocked the boat. Because there's safety, in what there's security in what you know. And of course, when we're talking about eternal salvation, then that really changes things. That really shakes things up. So I know that was hard for Stephen for a while that I went like as far off as I did. It wasn't just like, oh, I don't know about like it was like, what about and for me, it was like I needed that and it was enlivening and scary. I mean, scary. But for him, it was disorienting because yeah, because I feel like I expanded so much with my questions. Like it went from, like little bits to just like the lid blew off. And it was similar with other relationships in my life who with people who knew me as this one way. And of course, there's like I've said this so many times, just so much safety baked into all of that. So it's like if you are starting to deviate from the known, and you're in a community that you've been in that place with for a long time, they start to fear for you. They start to pray for you. They start to be concerned about you. And that is a big deal too, because you're already in a place of vulnerability and fragility and bravery and courage to even be following these questions that you have. And then you have like all, your support system around you, either looking at you like you're dangerous or possessed or you know unsafe or blinded, right, being led astray. And so there's just so conflicting and it's so challenging on so many levels, and that's just one aspect, of the challenge of deconstruction. But I'd have to say the payoff, if you can make it through that, which is not easy, it is not easy because you're also walking away from like community in a big sense. Now, of course, there's these spiritual communities all over the place, but there is something, very that just makes sense for us as humans that who want to like have a need, like an innate desire and drive to belong. And there's this structure of Christianity that is known throughout, the world and, largely the USA, that like when you stop belonging there, it's not like there's very known, just spiritually questioning communities that you can then step into. You're just kind of stepping into the unknown. And so that is, yeah, that's a really big deal. But if you can make it through that, then um, you reap really wonderful rewards. So I'd say the positive about all of this is that I feel free. Like I feel really free and happy and joyful and deeply, deeply at peace and inspired and creative. And that's because I'm not living in survival anymore. Like you don't have access to those things when you don't have access to safety. And there was a very small subset of safety that I had access to as a Christian. And now as I've really expanded with my beliefs, I feel like I have the safety that I have in my system is so much bigger. I have so much more capacity, and because of that, I have so much more joy and like good things that we all want to have. I have space for that in my system now, and that is the best thing about one of the best things about
That's
all of this.
beautiful. And we don't know that that's coming, right? And especially when you've pioneered it in your family, all it looks like is massive destruction. And it doesn't look like deconstruction, it looks like destruction, and it looks like all the buildings are falling, and there's nothing that's going to be good, um and it's really a beautiful freedom that is the punchline, but there is it feels like a death. it's this is what I said, it was all of the pain of dying and none of the relief of death. And that's what it feels like when it's very painful to process through the releasing ourselves from our faith. So I think the challenge, I'll shift to the question that you asked, Phil. I like that question of like what's different. That is hard. I think it's hard being such a profoundly thoughtful person, good-hearted person, wanting the best for people, and being judged by a label that I'm not anymore, and people not being able to see me for the, the goodness and the greatness that I am. That can be hard because I'm bringing so much love and grace and space and open heartedness to the table of relationships where you're allowed to be who you are. You could be whatever flavor of faith you want to be, and whatever, you know, philosophy or politics or gender. I'm fine. What's hard is that there's this narrow place, that there's a lot of places I don't fit in, and it's really interesting being the cheese that stands alone again, but for different reasons. And so I have this woman in my life, and I like her a lot. And she says to me, "You're such a smart person, and you've got these values and this and that." She goes, "So you're a Christian, right?" And I said, "No, I don't call myself a Christian. I have a beautiful faith, but I'm kind of private about it, and it's kind of, just my own." And she's like, "But you should be a Christian because that would be smart, and you're a smart person." Like, she was in such a place of cognitive dissonance. Like, how could you be a good person who raised your kids so consciously, and you're so peaceful and free, and you bring goodness to the world, but you're not a Christian? Because anybody who's that should be that. And so, like, it's really hard to have these moments where you're showing up as your full self, and somebody's having a mind bending moment of, wait, you don't fit in my category and you don't tick my boxes, and yet you're a good person, but I don't have a category for you. It's because, like I said, I'm this golden lab. I really want to love people. And when so people are so busy just like tilting their head going, I don't, I don't get you. It's just like, oh, that's sad because I was so excited to just have love between us. So that's I think the challenging part. The best part is that I live in alignment with what I believe, and I'm at spiritual peace. And I was able to raise my children in that. And I was able to get out of the religious beliefs before I raised them. And they are the example of what it's like to be healthy, safe, and free in the sense of their spiritual beings. And it's really beautiful to see what we humans can become when we're not raised in fear of a God outside of us. And I love that experiment that I got to live. That's probably one of my favorite parts.
Mm.
And it's really good to have my boys say, life or death, it's like I'm here. And they love, they're both on their own journeys, and there's no perfect journey anywhere, but I really love that they seem to know what matters, and they're at peace with themselves, or they're on the journey of that in a really beautiful way that doesn't involve a lot of fear and punishment. So, yeah.
Mm. Cool. Well, I think we'll kind of bring things to a close here. I really appreciate you guys sharing, and to those of you listening and watching, I mean, yeah, we're not here to say there's no challenging parts. Yeah, hopefully you hear it's the process of changing your beliefs, especially when you've run with them for a long time and your connections are built around those beliefs, and yeah, your morals or everything's tied to it. It's it's challenging. So we definitely are saying that, but I like that last little part because you don't know this at the beginning when you're in the hard part, but there is a lot of beauty and joy and peace and freedom that awaits you down the road, and I didn't know that in the earlier part too. It was more just scary and disorienting and confusing, but God, I'm so grateful for what life feels like in this space right now. And yeah, that somehow we found the courage to walk down that path when it would have been pretty reasonable to not do it. Pretty reasonable to just not do it. So I hope that you listening, you feel encouraged. Man, we'd love to get the chance to connect with you, whether that's over email or Zoom or whatever, or at a gathering or something. We want to encourage you. We want to listen, ask good questions, but we're really glad that you're on this journey with us as well. Things coming up. Stace, is there anything we want to make sure we leave with here at the end?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, well, it looks like Rock's putting up the screen. For
Okay.
anybody who wants to be on our email list and know about when our next online meeting is, or our next in-person meeting, if you want to get involved, you want to talk about a certain topic and you want to throw those suggestions at us, you want to do an interview with us, just go to commonground.love / whatever / contact, and fill that in, and we'd love to stay connected with you. We also would love for you to be part of what we've got going on. We've got come to the table events that are going to be coming up in a couple of months. If you're interested in joining us on one of our come to the table dinners where we have conversation, meal, some wine, non-alcoholic drinks if you need that or want that. And it's really a great place to be in community and conversation as we come to the table together and share our journeys with each other. There's also in the works a live event where we would all gather, and that is something that is part of the dream for either the end, probably closer to the end of this year. Um, and we would love to have you be part of it. So if you're interested in any of that, and if you are excited about giving to Common Ground, we would welcome your donations and support. We have all the tech costs and the support for technology. We want to do more things and get more things out there and get someone on our team who's dedicated to marketing and all of that. And also for our live events coming up. So we welcome your support. $25 a month on a regular basis, something like that would be a tremendous help. And we welcome you to join us. I wanted to say something else about, next month. Oh, and I've got a great interview coming up with I'm going to do this one-on-one interview with a woman who talk about deconstructing her faith, and she came out of a very big movement. Um, and I don't want to give too much away because she and I are still forming when it's going to happen, but we're going to sit down and have a really honest chat. And it's going to be one of the first times she was asked to be in documentaries. She was asked to come forward and testify and really be a voice out there. And she's chosen to remain silent on a lot of things, and she's agreed to do an interview with me with Common Ground, where I'll get to ask her story, and it's so compelling. I just sat with my jaw on the floor, and I can't wait for you guys to hear that. So we've got that coming up at some point too. So I think that's it. Phil, is there anything else?
Love it. Great to be with you guys. Let's do it
Thanks.
again sometime.
Very soon, like next month. All right.
Yeah, like next month.
Love you guys. Be
Okay,
well.
everyone. Bye.
Bye. Ciao.
Bye. Good night. Good night.